After weeks by my dying sister's side, I returned home, hoping for comfort. Instead, my daughter-in-law opened the door, a smirk on her face, telling me they'd packed my life away. She informed me they'd moved me to a nursing home, claiming I was even with them after paying their house down payment. I just smiled. A quiet knowing. What they don't know is, I took a box, and that box changed everything. Like, share, and tell me where you're listening from so I can see how far my story reaches. The engine's hum was the only lullaby I'd known for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of hushed goodbyes, and the sterile scent of hospitals, of watching my sister, Clara, fade away. The grief was a heavy cloak, pressing down on my shoulders, but beneath it, a faint flicker of hope kept me going. Hope for my own bed, a warm bath, maybe even Thomas, my son, cooking one of his surprisingly good pot roasts. The thought of home, my home for the last 4 years, was a distant comfort. As I pulled into the driveway, the familiar scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine should have greeted me, but a chill seemed to cut through the late afternoon air. The rose bushes Thomas had planted for me last spring looked vibrant, their crimson petals a stark contrast to the weariness that settled deep in my bones. I stepped out, my old satchel clutched tight, and walked to the front door, fumbling for my key. It slid into the lock, but turned with an unfamiliar resistance. I tried again, a little harder, then harder still. It simply wouldn't budge. The mechanism felt foreign, stubbornly unyielding. My heart gave a little skip, a premonition I tried to push away. Surely, it was just stuck. Just then, the door swung open, revealing Valerie, my daughter-in-law. Her smile was too bright, too fixed, a porcelain mask that didn't quite reach her eyes. Those eyes, usually darting with a kind of restless energy, were now calm, almost triumphant. "Eleanor," she said, her voice smooth, devoid of any warmth. "Back so soon? We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." I blinked, still gripping the useless key. "The funeral was this morning, Valerie. I wanted to get home. My key isn't working." Valerie's smile widened, revealing a row of perfectly straight white teeth. "Oh, that's right. Well, we had the locks changed yesterday. For security, you know." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, then added, her tone sickeningly casual. "We've found you a lovely new address, Eleanor. A beautiful assisted living facility. You'll be much happier there, really." The world tilted. My ears buzzed, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the chirping birds. A new address? What are you talking about, Valerie? "This is my home." I tried to step inside, but she subtly blocked my path, her slender arm resting against the doorframe like an invisible barrier. Over her shoulder, I saw it. The hallway, once a gallery of our family's history, pictures of Thomas as a baby, my wedding photo, Clara and I laughing on a beach vacation, was now stripped bare. In their place hung abstract canvases, all harsh lines and muted colors, utterly devoid of personality. My stomach clenched. "I need to see Thomas," I said, my voice barely a whisper, a tremor I couldn't control. As if on cue, Thomas appeared from the living room, a ghost in his own house. His shoulders were slumped, his gaze fixed on the polished wooden floor. He couldn't meet my eyes. My strong, kind son, now a boy again, unable to face his mother. "Mom," he began, his voice thick with what sounded like forced remorse. "Valerie and we've talked about this for a long time. We're ready to start a family, and we need our space. You know?" He finally glanced up, a flicker of something shame, perhaps, in his eyes before they darted away again. "Space?" I echoed, the word tasting like ash. "Thomas, I sold my mother's house, my inheritance, to give you $48,000 for the down payment on this house. My name is on the deed, just as much as yours. The memory of the sacrifice, the long conversations, the promise of a shared future, burned in my chest." Valerie scoffed, a delicate sound that was more cutting than a shout. "Eleanor, that was 4 years ago. You've had free housing ever since." I'd say we're perfectly even. Her cold smile returned, sharper this time. Besides, we've already made arrangements. Your room is packed. Everything is in boxes in the garage. We took care of it while you were away, so you wouldn't have to bother. Well, the sheer audacity of it, the calculated cruelty, hit me like a physical blow. They had waited until I was consumed by grief, by Clara's last days, to erase me from my own life. My belongings, my memories, my very presence, reduced to boxes, relegated to a garage. A strange, involuntary sound escaped my lips. It started as a choked sob, but twisted into a harsh, mirthless laugh. A laugh born of disbelief, pain, and a sudden, burning rage that dried my tears before they could fall. It was a sound that didn't belong to me, a stranger's laugh echoing in the house I no longer owned. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, the strange laugh still vibrating in the air. If that's how it is, just let me get a box. I walked past Valerie, who seemed taken aback by my sudden calm. Thomas remained rooted, a statue of guilt. The garage was indeed filled with boxes, neatly stacked, labeled in Valerie's precise handwriting. My entire life, reduced to cardboard and tape. I picked up one box at random, a small one that felt surprisingly heavy, filled with what felt like papers. It was light enough to carry with one hand. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me struggle, of witnessing my complete defeat. Without another word, without a backward glance at the house that was no longer mine, I walked out. The engine of my old sedan rumbled to life, a comforting vibration against my numb hands. I drove away, the house receding in my rearview mirror, a monument to betrayal. It wasn't until I was several blocks away, the familiar streets blurring into an unfamiliar landscape, that the tears finally came, hot and stinging, blurring the road ahead. My mind was a blank canvas of shock and sorrow. But a tiny part of me, fueled by that strange, bitter laugh, felt a flicker of something else. Something cold and resolute. I drove until the city lights gave way to the glow of a faded motel sign, its neon promise of vacancy, a cruel mockery of my situation. Inside the cramped, musty room, my phone buzzed. A text from Valerie. The storage unit address is on the note in the box. Your other things are there. Unbeknownst to me, the box I had clutched so tightly, the one filled with papers, held more than just sentimental value. It held the key to a different kind of future. The cheap motel room smelled of stale cigarettes and disinfectant. I sat on the edge of the bed, the thin blanket doing little to ward off the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The initial shock of being locked out of my own home, of hearing Valerie's cool pronouncements, was slowly giving way to a more profound ache. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal, it was the pain of a lifetime of sacrifice, laid bare and dismissed with a casual wave of a hand. My gaze fell on the single box I had carried out of the house, now resting innocently on the worn carpet. Papers, I thought. Just papers, but they felt heavy with the weight of my past, a past I couldn't escape, even here in this desolate room. How had it come to this? How had the boy I raised, the son I cherished, become this distant stranger, unable to meet my eyes? My mind drifted back, years and decades falling away like autumn leaves. Thomas was just 5 years old when his father decided he wasn't cut out for family life, leaving us with a terse note and a trail of unpaid bills. I remembered the hollow ache in my chest, the fear that coiled in my stomach. But more vividly, I remembered the fierce resolve that solidified in my heart. I would protect my son. I was a registered nurse, but one job wasn't enough. So, I took on extra shifts at the local clinic, often working 14-hour days, fueled by bad coffee and an endless reservoir of maternal love. I'd come home exhausted, my feet throbbing, only to find Thomas asleep on the couch, his tiny hand clutching a worn teddy bear. I'd carry him to his bed, brush his soft hair from his forehead, and whisper promises I intended to keep. I was at every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every soccer match, even if it meant sacrificing precious sleep. His childhood milestones were my victories, his laughter, my most treasured reward. We were a team, always. When it came time for college, Thomas dreamed of engineering, a path that promised a future far brighter than anything I could imagine. The tuition, however, was a mountain. I didn't hesitate. I sold my mother's pearl necklace, a string of heirlooms that held sentimental value far beyond their monetary worth. I cashed out my small retirement fund, a nest egg I'd meticulously built for my own golden years, telling myself that his future was my golden years. The financial strain was immense, a constant tightrope walk, but I never let him see the worry. I just smiled, encouraged him, and made sure he had everything he needed to succeed. And he did. Thomas graduated with honors, landing a high-paying software job right out of college. My heart swelled with pride. He was everything I had hoped he'd be. Smart, successful, kind. It was around this time that he met Valerie. She was beautiful, undeniably so, with an easy elegance that spoke of a life far removed from my own modest existence. Her family owned a chain of high-end boutiques, and their wealth seemed to shimmer around her like an aura. From the first dinner I shared with them, I felt Valerie's subtle judgment. It was never explicit, just a slight narrowing of her eyes when she looked at my worn cardigan, a delicate curl of her lip when I mentioned my nursing shifts, a quiet correction of my grammar in front of Thomas. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself it was just her way, that I was being overly sensitive. Thomas, swept up in their whirlwind romance, didn't seem to notice. Or perhaps he chose not to. Their engagement was announced with great fanfare, and soon they began the frantic search for a house. The market was brutal, and even with Thomas's impressive salary, a significant down payment was proving difficult. That's when I offered. My mother's cottage, the little house where I grew up, had been fully paid off years ago. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A place of peace and memories. I proposed selling it and using the proceeds to help them secure their dream home. The cottage sold for $56,000. Without a second thought, I gave Thomas $48,000 of it for the down payment on the beautiful, spacious house they now called theirs. It was a leap of faith, a final, grand gesture of a mother's love, cementing our future together. Or so I believed. It was Valerie who suggested I live with them. Just for a while. Eleanor, she'd said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. You can help us settle in. Help with the house. It would be wonderful. Thomas nodded enthusiastically, a relief in his eyes that I now understood was not for my presence, but for a solution to their problem. I moved in, eager to be a part of their new life, ready to help in any way I could. And help I did. I cooked their meals, cleaned their house, did their laundry. I managed the grocery shopping, ran errands, even took care of Valerie's demanding little dog when they were out. The while stretched into 4 years, and I slowly realized that help out was a euphemism for unpaid maid and cook. The passive-aggressive comments from Valerie grew more frequent, more cutting. Eleanor, darling, the dust on the mantelpiece is simply dreadful. Are you feeling all right? Or, this casserole is lovely, but perhaps next time we could try something a little more modern? Thomas became increasingly distant, engrossed in his work or Valerie's social calendar, rarely engaging in the comfortable conversations we once shared. I saw him less and less, sometimes only at dinner, where his eyes would avoid mine. Holidays were the cruelest. Thanksgiving, Christmas, even my own birthday, often found me alone in the house, a solitary figure rattling around rooms that increasingly felt less like home and more like a hotel I was expected to clean. They would dine out or visit Valerie's parents, always with a vague excuse, a hurried apology, a promise to make it up to me. They never did. The truth, stark and painful, eventually settled over me. I had become a burden, an embarrassment, something to be neatly discarded, like an old piece of furniture that no longer fit the decor. My purpose, in their eyes, was served. I had given them a home, and now I was simply in the way. The bitter tears flowed freely in the quiet motel room, tracing hot paths down my cheeks. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the crushing realization of how thoroughly I had been used, was suffocating. I cried myself to sleep, a deep, exhausted slumber born of grief and a profound sense of loss. When I woke in the early hours, the darkness still clinging to the room, the defeat was palpable, a heavy blanket that smothered every spark of hope. I awoke with a start at precisely 3:47 a.m., the harsh glare of the motel's digital clock, a rude awakening from a fitful sleep. The room was still cloaked in shadows, the only light seeping in from beneath the curtains, hinting at the distant glow of the city. I felt old, every joint aching, every muscle weary. Exhaustion was a heavy blanket, but beneath it, a raw, throbbing emptiness churned. Defeated. That was the word. Completely, utterly defeated. The tears of the previous night had left my eyes gritty and swollen, and my throat felt tight, a physical manifestation of the grief and betrayal that still choked me. I lay there for a long time, staring at the popcorn ceiling, 1,000 memories swirling through my mind. Memories of Thomas as a cheerful toddler, a gangly teenager, a proud graduate. Each one was a fresh stab of pain, reminding me of all I had given and how little I had seemingly received in return. My gaze drifted to the single cardboard box I had carried out of the house. It sat there, unassuming, a silent sentinel in the dim light. I hadn't opened it last night, too consumed by shock and sorrow. Now, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even a desperate need for distraction, nudged me. What had Valerie allowed me to take? A cruel joke, probably. A collection of old photographs she deemed unworthy of their pristine, modern home. I pushed myself up, my bones protesting with soft clicks and groans, and moved to the box. The tape peeled away with a dry rip, and I pushed back the flaps. Inside, nestled beneath a few folded sweaters, items I barely remembered packing, I saw it. A worn, faded yellow envelope. It looked old, crinkled at the edges, and felt thick to the touch. Scrawled across its front, in my own slightly shaky handwriting from years ago, were the words, "House documents. Important." My heart, which had felt like a dead weight in my chest, gave a sudden, jarring lurch. Important? What could be important enough to warrant such a label in the chaos of my life? My fingers trembled slightly as I reached in, pulling out the weighty envelope. It wasn't light, not like a few bills or a birthday card. This felt substantial. With bated breath, I tipped the envelope, and a stack of papers slid out onto the motel's patterned comforter. My eyes, still blurry from sleep and tears, struggled to focus in the dim light. The first sheet was heavy parchment, official-looking. My gaze scanned the top, searching for a clue, for an explanation. Then, 2 words jumped out at me, bold and undeniable. Warranty deed. My breath hitched. A warranty deed. To what? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. And then, as if a spotlight had suddenly illuminated the page, I saw the address. The address of the house Thomas and Valerie were living in. My house, the house I had helped them buy with the proceeds of my mother's cottage. A tremor went through me, not of fear, but of a strange, unsettling excitement. I picked up the deed, holding it closer, my eyes devouring every word. My name was there, clear as day. Belinda Clark, my maiden name, followed by now Eleanor Vance, and right beside it, undeniably, was Thomas Vance. A memory surfaced, hazy at first, then sharp and clear. 2 years ago, Thomas had approached me, concern etched on his brow. He'd explained how important it was to update the deed, to add his name to mine to avoid probate hassles later on. He'd made it sound so responsible, so forward-thinking, a practical step to protect both of us. He'd even taken care of all the paperwork, bringing it to me to sign. I, ever trusting, ever eager to make things easy for my son, had signed without a second thought. I never removed my name. Why would I? It was our house. My eyes darted down the page, searching for the crucial details. And there it was, in crisp, legal jargon that suddenly felt as clear as a bell. Tenants in common, it stated. Eleanor Vance, 70% interest. Thomas Vance, 30% interest. 70%. 70%. The words echoed in my mind, a powerful crescendo. I owned 70% of that house. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave, washing away the fatigue, the sorrow, the crushing sense of defeat. They couldn't legally lock me out. They couldn't sell the house without my signature. Every casually cruel word Valerie had uttered, every dismissive glance from Thomas, every moment of my quiet humiliation came rushing back, now infused with a new, potent significance. A slow, hard smile, one utterly devoid of warmth, spread across my face. It was a smile I hadn't worn in years, perhaps not since my husband left. It was the smile of a woman who had been underestimated, overlooked, and discarded. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had swept me aside, reduced me to nothing. But they were wrong. So terribly, spectacularly wrong. The defeat vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline, cold and invigorating. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A fierce resolve hardened within me. My son and his wife had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had underestimated a mother's love, a mother's sacrifice, and a mother's quiet strength. They had tried to erase me, but in doing so, they had inadvertently handed me the very weapon I needed to fight back. I would teach them a lesson about respect, about gratitude, about the true cost of their cruel ambition. A lesson they would never, ever forget. My first step, as soon as the sun rose, would be to find the best lawyer in this city. The rest of the night passed in a blur of frantic reading. I pored over every document in the envelope, understanding the legal implications, the power I now held. The sting of betrayal was still there, but it was now laced with a steely determination. The game had changed. The first light of dawn was a faint gray smudge against the horizon as I sat at the small, wobbly table in the motel room. The warranty deed, along with a few other carefully preserved documents, was spread out before me. All night, I had reread them, the words slowly transforming from confusing legal jargon into a clear, undeniable truth. The house, the very one I had been locked out of, was unequivocally mine. The papers confirmed it. I had purchased the property 15 years ago. A modest but sturdy home. A place where Thomas and I could finally put down roots after years of renting. I remembered the pride I felt paying off that mortgage over 13 grueling years, a testament to my dedication and sacrifice. 2 years ago, when Thomas asked me to add him to the deed to avoid probate, I had agreed. He said it would make things simpler in the future. He had meticulously filled out the paperwork, and I, trusting and blind, had signed it without a detailed examination, assuming it was a straightforward addition. But it wasn't just an addition. It was a transfer with a clear division. 70% in my name, 30% in his. My ownership was undeniable, substantial, legally ironclad. At 6 a.m., I was already at a Greasy Spoon diner across the street from the motel, the kind of place with perpetually refilled coffee and chipped ceramic mugs. The diner was quiet. Only a few truckers and early risers hunched over their breakfasts. I ate a plate of lukewarm eggs and toast, forcing down each bite, trying to ground myself. My mind was racing, a whirlwind of anger and determination. I needed a plan. I needed a lawyer. By 8:30 a.m., I was standing outside the glass doors of Evelyn Reed and Associates. The office was located in a modern, slightly intimidating building downtown. I had found their number through a quick internet search, drawn by their promise of free initial consultations. My palms were sweating as I pushed open the heavy door, the crisp, professional air of the lobby, a stark contrast to the motel's musty confines. A friendly receptionist led me to a sleek conference room a few minutes later. Evelyn Reed was younger than I expected, probably in her late 30s, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and held a depth that belied her youthful appearance. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense ponytail, and she wore a tailored gray suit. She extended a firm hand. "Eleanor Vance, I presume? Please, have a seat. How can I help you today?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. The words tumbled out, a torrent of my life story. I told her everything. My struggles as a single mother, working 2 jobs, selling my mother's pearls, cashing out my retirement for Thomas's college education. I recounted the sacrifice of my mother's cottage, the $48,000 for the down payment, the 4 years I had spent living with them, becoming their unpaid housekeeper and cook, and finally, the cold, brutal eviction, the changed locks, Valerie's triumphant smirk, and Thomas's averted gaze. Evelyn listened, her expression unreadable, occasionally nodding, making quick notes on a pad. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy. I reached into my satchel and pulled out the yellow envelope, sliding the warranty deed across the polished table. They said I was even. They said they'd moved me to a new address. But I found this. Evelyn picked up the deed, her sharp eyes scanning the document with an almost practiced speed. She held it for a moment, then looked up at me, a flicker of something sympathy, perhaps, or professional admiration in her gaze. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice clear and authoritative. "This deed confirms what you suspected. You own 70% of this property. Your son owns 30%. Their actions, locking you out of your own home and claiming you no longer live there, are unequivocally illegal." A wave of relief, potent and dizzying, washed over me. It wasn't just my anger that had been justified. My legal standing was solid. "So," I asked, a fresh surge of hope bubbling up, "can I just go back? Walk right in?" Evelyn shook her head slowly. "You could. Legally, you have every right to. But consider what kind of living situation that would be. They've already shown you their true colors. Imagine the hostility, the constant tension. You'd be living in a war zone, Mrs. Vance, not a home." She was right. Of course. The image of Valerie's cold smile, Thomas's shame, flashed in my mind. Returning would be a Pyrrhic victory, a daily reminder of their betrayal. "So," I said, the hope dimming slightly, "what do I do? Just let them have it? Let them get away with this?" The thought was unbearable. Evelyn's lips curved into a sharp, knowing smile, a glint in her eye. "No, Mrs. Vance, we don't let them have it. We make them leave." My jaw dropped. "Make them leave? But—" She leaned forward, her voice dropping slightly, conspiratorial. "We have a few options. We can file for what's called a partition action, which would force the sale of the property and divide the proceeds according to ownership. That's usually a longer process. Or, given the circumstances, we can file an emergency motion for hostile possession. This argues that you've been unlawfully dispossessed of your property by a co-owner, and it often results in a quicker resolution, forcing them to vacate." My mind reeled. An emergency motion. What would that cost? Evelyn paused, assessing me. "A legal battle like this can be expensive, Mrs. Vance. Depending on how much they fight it, you're looking at anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 in legal fees, possibly more if it goes to trial." My heart sank. My entire life savings, after Clara's illness and the motel stay, amounted to just $1,347. I don't have that kind of money, Miss Reed. Not right now." Evelyn nodded, undeterred. "I understand. But you have something even better, Mrs. Vance. Equity. You own 70% of a house that, even at a conservative estimate, is worth at least $350,000 in this market. That means you have over $245,000 in equity. We can explore securing a line of credit against that equity to cover your legal fees. It's a common practice in these situations. It's a line of credit." The idea was audacious, frightening, yet exhilarating. It was using their own house against them, a tool of poetic justice. "It will strain your relationship with your son irrevocably." "Mrs. Vance," Evelyn said, her gaze steady. "Are you prepared for that?" I looked at her, then, down at the deed, the names Thomas and Eleanor intertwined on the page. "What relationship?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. He already threw me away. He already showed me what I meant to him. At least this way, I'll have a home. And they'll learn a lesson. The decision was made. I would fight. Don't go anywhere. This story is just getting started. If you're finding yourself rooting for Eleanor, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to follow every twist and turn of her journey. Leaving Evelyn Reed's office, a sense of purpose, cold and sharp, had replaced the familiar ache in my chest. I had signed a stack of forms, handed over every document I had, and felt a profound shift. Evelyn, her demeanor calm but resolute, had promised to file an emergency motion. We should get a hearing within a week or two. Eleanor, she'd said, her confidence a balm to my frayed nerves. Prepare yourself. This won't be easy. My first call was to Beatrice. Beatrice, my oldest and dearest friend, was a force of nature, a retired school teacher, with a heart of gold and a tongue of fire. I choked out my story, the words still raw with emotion. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. That snake Thomas! And that viper Valerie! She boomed. Eleanor Vance, get yourself over here right now. You're staying with me. Within an hour, I was at Beatrice's cozy, slightly cluttered bungalow, enveloped in a hug that felt like coming home. She made me a cup of strong tea, listened with fierce intensity, and then, with a glint in her eye, declared, "It's about damn time you stood up for yourself, honey. This is long overdue." Her unwavering support was a lifeline. The barrage started almost immediately. My phone vibrated relentlessly in my purse. Calls from Thomas, then texts. I ignored them all, following Evelyn's strict instructions not to engage. The voicemails, however, played out like a cruel, multi-act drama. Initially, Thomas's tone was placating, full of feigned concern. "Mom, where are you? We're worried. Let's just talk this through." Then, a shift, his voice taking on a manipulative edge. "You're ruining everything, Mom." Valerie's upset. "This isn't how we do things." Finally, the last message, cold and laced with bitter accusation. "You always thought you knew best, didn't you? You'll end up alone, Mom. Completely alone." Beatrice listened to them with me, her face hardening with each message. "Alone?" she scoffed, after the last one finished. "He's a grown man, Eleanor. He made his choices. And he's certainly not alone, is he? He has his wife, his fancy house. Don't let him get into your head with that nonsense. It's just guilt talking, trying to turn it back on you." A few days later, while Beatrice and I were gardening, Martha Jenkins, an old neighbor from Thomas's street, stopped by. She was a notorious gossip, but harmless, and Beatrice kept her well supplied with her prize-winning homemade jam. "Beatrice, Eleanor, have you seen the changes on Thomas's street?" Martha chirped, oblivious to the situation. "They're doing so much to the house. New windows, a new patio, even talking about redoing the kitchen from scratch." Valerie said they're finally making it truly their own. "Moving fast, they are." The words struck me like a physical blow. Making it truly their own. They truly believed they had won. They were not just evicting me. They were erasing me, whitewashing my very presence from the walls, from the garden, from the life I had built with them. It fueled the cold fire of my resolve. Then came Valerie's text. "Eleanor, darling, let's meet for coffee. We can talk this through, like family. No need for all this unpleasantness." It was a trap. A transparent attempt to smooth things over, to lull me into a false sense of security before twisting the knife again. Beatrice and I exchanged a knowing glance. "Family?" Beatrice snorted. "After what they did? She's trying to get you to back down before the legal papers hit their doorstep." The next day, Evelyn called. Her voice was firm, serious. "Eleanor, I've just been served with a response from Thomas and Valerie's counsel. They've hired Marcus Thorne." My heart sank. Marcus Thorne was a name I recognized, a high-profile, expensive lawyer known for his aggressive tactics. This wasn't going to be a gentle conversation over coffee. "He's already arguing abandonment on your part, Eleanor," Evelyn continued, "claiming you willingly left the property. He's also trying to spin this as a hostile takeover by you, attempting to dispossess your son," Evelyn warned me. "He's going to attack your character, try to paint you as an unstable, disgruntled mother trying to ruin her son's life." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Let him try," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "The truth is the truth, Evelyn. And it's on paper." "Exactly," Evelyn affirmed. "Which brings me to your next task. We need to document every single financial contribution you made to that household. Everything. Groceries, utilities, property taxes, maintenance, even small repairs. Every penny you contributed since you moved in, on top of the down payment." That evening, armed with old bank statements, receipts I had meticulously kept, and a calculator, I began to work. Beatrice sat beside me, offering quiet support, occasionally fetching me another cup of tea. The numbers accumulated, slowly at first, then rapidly, becoming a stark, undeniable testament to my contributions. 4 years of groceries. I estimated an average of $300 a month, conservatively. That was $14,400. Utilities, another $200 a month, $9,600. Property taxes, which I had insisted on contributing to, knowing Thomas and Valerie had just stretched themselves thin with the mortgage. $4,000 a year, $16,000 over 4 years. Then there were the miscellaneous household expenses. Repairs, garden supplies, cleaning products, the occasional restaurant meal I'd paid for. That added up to another $73,000 in total household expenses. And finally, the initial $48,000 down payment. The grand total stared back at me from the page. $121,000. $121,000. My heart ached, but also hardened. This wasn't just my home. It was a substantial investment, a lifeline I had extended, and they had severed it. "This isn't just a gift, Eleanor," Beatrice said, her voice firm as she looked over my calculations. "This is a debt, compensation for housing, and they owe you." The nights that followed were sleepless. The fear of losing, of completely alienating Thomas, of becoming truly alone, gnawed at me. But each time, Beatrice was there. Her hand a comforting weight on my arm, her voice a steady anchor. "You're going to win, Eleanor," she'd whisper, as the first light of dawn touched the window. "Because you have something they don't. The truth, and a paper trail to prove it." Tuesday morning dawned cold and gray, a sky the color of old cement. I stood before Beatrice's full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of my simple, dark dress. I felt a knot of nerves in my stomach, a familiar sensation from my nursing days before a difficult procedure. But beneath it, a steely resolve held firm. This was it. The day everything changed. Beatrice, ever the loyal friend, drove me to the courthouse. Her hand patted mine reassuringly on the armrest. "You've got this, Eleanor. Just tell the truth. That's all you need to do." Evelyn was waiting for us outside the courtroom doors, her usual professional calm a steadying presence. She offered a small, encouraging smile. "Ready?" As we stepped inside, the courtroom was sparsely populated, hushed with anticipation. My eyes immediately found them. Thomas and Valerie, already seated at the defense table with Marcus Thorne. Thomas wore a crisp, dark suit, a sharp contrast to the casual clothes I usually saw him in. Valerie, beside him, was impeccably dressed in an expensive, tailored dress, her hair perfectly coiffed. They looked like a power couple, poised and confident, as if they belonged there, ready to win. Thomas kept his gaze fixed straight ahead, avoiding my eyes. But Valerie? Oh. Valerie couldn't resist. Her head turned slowly, her eyes locking onto mine. There was no pretense of a polite smile now, no artificial sweetness. Her gaze was a laser beam of pure, unadulterated fury, a look that promised war. I met it head-on, feeling a surge of my own resolve. A bailiff called out, "All rise!" And we all stood as the judge entered. Judge Eleanor Vance. The name sent a jolt through me, a strange echo of my own identity. She was a sharp, intelligent woman with an austere demeanor, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression unreadable behind her large, rimmed glasses. Evelyn began, her voice clear and precise, laying out the facts. She detailed my 70% ownership of the property, the illegal act of being locked out, the denial of entry, and the unconscionable eviction. She presented the warranty deed, highlighting my name and the significant percentage. Marcus Thorne, when it was his turn, countered with practiced ease. He framed the situation not as a legal dispute, but as a deeply regrettable family dispute, being weaponized by an overbearing mother against her successful son and his beloved wife. He painted a picture of me as an interfering presence, someone who couldn't let go, who was now vindictively attacking her own flesh and blood. Then it was my turn to take the stand. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice, to my own surprise, came out steady and clear as I swore to tell the truth. I recounted my entire story, starting from the very beginning. I spoke of buying the house, of the 13 years I spent paying off the mortgage, the sacrifices I made. I explained Thomas's request to be added to the deed, my unquestioning trust, and how I had been left with 70% ownership. I detailed my financial contributions, producing the meticulously kept records I had painstakingly compiled with Beatrice. Exhibit A, Evelyn announced, as my binder of receipts and calculations was presented to the court. The numbers spoke volumes. The $48,000 down payment from my mother's cottage, the $14,400 for groceries, $9,600 for utilities, $16,000 in property taxes, and the $73,000 for various household expenses. The total of $121,000 seemed to hang in the air, a stark figure of my financial commitment. I saw Judge Vance's eyebrows rise slightly as she reviewed the documentation, a subtle but significant gesture. I then recounted the final, cruel act. My return home, exhausted and grieving from Clara's funeral, only to find the locks changed. Valerie's cold smile, her casual dismissal of my presence, and Thomas's inability to meet my gaze. I described how my belongings were unceremoniously packed into boxes, left in the garage, my life reduced to a few cartons. Evelyn then underscored my age and circumstances, a woman returning from caring for her dying sister, only to be stripped of her home by her own son, emphasizing the truly unconscionable nature of their actions. Marcus Thorne's cross-examination was sharp, aggressive. He tried to chip away at my credibility, twisting my words, insinuating motives where there were none. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "that you were perpetually interfering in your son and daughter-in-law's lives? That you refused to respect their privacy, constantly interjecting yourself into their decisions, their finances, even their plans for a family?" "No," I stated, looking him directly in the eye. "I helped where I was asked. I contributed to the household, financially and otherwise. I always tried to stay out of their way. I valued their privacy." He pressed on, suggesting I had a controlling nature, that I saw their home as merely an extension of my own, and that I had resented Valerie's role as the mistress of the house. I denied it all, but I could feel the insidious nature of his narrative, the way he was trying to paint me as the villain, the meddling mother. The damage of his implications was evident in the subtle shifts of the court staff's expressions. Evelyn's redirect was brief but effective. She reiterated my primary ownership, the years of mortgage payments, the significant financial contributions, and the complete lack of support or alternative housing offered after the eviction. She left no doubt about my legal standing or the injustice I had suffered. When I finally stepped down from the stand, my legs felt weak, my entire body emotionally drained. I avoided looking at Thomas or Valerie, but as I walked past their table, I caught a glimpse of Thomas. His jaw was clenched, his eyes downcast, fixed on the table before him. For the first time, I saw not just shame, but a flicker of something else, a dawning realization, perhaps, of the magnitude of what he had done and what was about to unfold. The brief recess felt like an eternity. Every nerve in my body hummed with a mixture of apprehension and exhaustion. Beatrice held my hand, squeezing it periodically as we waited outside the courtroom. Evelyn remained calm, reviewing her notes, offering a few quiet words of reassurance. Finally, the bailiff announced Judge Vance's return. We rose as she swept back into the courtroom, her face composed, her gaze unwavering. There was no preamble, no lengthy deliberation. Her voice, when she spoke, was crisp and authoritative, cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "The court has reviewed the evidence presented," Judge Vance began, her eyes sweeping over all of us. "It is clear from the warranty deed that Eleanor Vance, also known as Belinda Clark, is the primary owner of the property in question, holding a 70% interest. Thomas Vance holds a 30% interest. As a co-owner, Mrs. Vance had every right to occupy her property." My heart pounded. Beatrice squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. "Furthermore," the judge continued, her voice rising slightly, "the detailed financial records submitted by Mrs. Vance, Exhibit A, unequivocally demonstrate her substantial contributions to the household's expenses, totaling over $70,000, in addition to the initial $48,000 down payment for the property. This evidence refutes any claim that Mrs. Vance was merely a guest or a casual occupant. She was, and remains, a significant financial contributor and a legal resident of her home." I saw Thomas flinch, his shoulders hunching. Valerie's jaw was tight, her eyes darting between the judge and Marcus Thorne. The actions taken by Thomas Vance and Valerie Vance to change the locks, deny entry, and remove Mrs. Vance's belongings without her consent are not only legally improper but, given the circumstances, are frankly unconscionable. To evict an elderly parent, especially after she had just returned from caring for a dying family member, demonstrates a severe lack of respect and filial duty. Valerie began to whisper urgently to Thomas, her hand grabbing his arm. But he remained frozen, his gaze still fixed on the table in front of him. "Therefore," Judge Vance stated, her voice resonating through the room, "this court orders Thomas Vance and Valerie Vance to immediately provide Eleanor Vance with working keys and restore full access to her property. Furthermore, to allow for a long-term and amicable resolution to this situation, Thomas Vance and Valerie Vance are hereby ordered to vacate the premises at house address within 30 days. A gasp escaped Valerie's lips, quickly stifled by Thorne. I felt a wave of dizziness, an overwhelming mix of shock and profound relief. My home was truly mine again. "This order is effective immediately," the judge emphasized, leaving no room for doubt. "Failure to comply will result in further legal action, including potential contempt of court charges and forfeiture of any remaining interest in the property." A quiet sob escaped Beatrice, tears of pure joy streaming down her face. Evelyn gave me a small, triumphant smile. I was overwhelmed, a tightness in my throat preventing any words from forming. Valerie, however, found her voice, shrill and indignant. "This is insane. You can't just throw us out of our home." She leaped to her feet, her face contorted with fury. Judge Vance fixed her with an icy stare. "Miss Vance," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "Let me be perfectly clear. This is not your home. It is Mrs. Clark's home, which she generously allowed you to live in. You repaid that generosity with cruelty and legal overreach. You have 30 days to find a new residence. Use them wisely. Bailiff, please escort Miss Vance back to her seat." Marcus Thorne quickly moved to calm Valerie, his hand gently but firmly guiding her back into her chair, whispering urgent words. Thomas remained silent, unmoving, his face a mask of shame. But this time, he finally lifted his eyes, looking directly at me. His gaze was full of guilt, sorrow, and something else. A deep, almost desperate regret. The look lingered, a silent plea for forgiveness I wasn't ready to grant. I rose from my seat, my legs still a little shaky, but my head held high. Beatrice enveloped me in a fierce hug as we walked out of the courtroom, her joy palpable. Evelyn, ever the professional, congratulated me quietly. "The battle is won, Eleanor. Now we need to decide on the long-term plan for the house. We can discuss options when you're ready." As we emerged into the cool, gray air outside the courthouse, I saw him, Thomas. He stood alone beside his truck, his expensive suit looking oddly out of place, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Valerie and Thorne were nowhere in sight. He had waited. I stopped, disengaging from Beatrice's arm. "Beatrice," I said softly, "could you wait for me for a moment?" "I need to speak to him." She nodded, sensing the weight of the moment, and moved a little distance away. I walked towards Thomas, my steps deliberate. He looked up as I approached, his eyes still heavy with shame. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, perhaps to apologize, but I cut him off. "Don't," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the emotion that raged within me. I looked at him, truly looked at the son I had sacrificed everything for, the man who had let me be cast out. "You stood there, Thomas, and watched Valerie tell me my life was packed away. You watched her smile as she sent me to a nursing home. You let them change the locks. You packed my things yourself, didn't you?" My voice, though quiet, was filled with an undeniable force. He nodded, his head bowing slightly, unable to meet my gaze again. "You have 30 days, I told him, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, yet firm. 30 days to find a new place. I suggest you start looking immediately." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there alone, a stark figure against the gray backdrop of the courthouse. I had barely turned away from Thomas when his voice, raw and desperate, stopped me. "Mom, wait!" I paused, not turning around, not wanting to see the desperation in his eyes, but unable to completely ignore him. "Did you ever love me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Or was I just some project to you, something you could control?" The question hit me with the force of a blow, twisting the knife of pain in my gut. I turned back slowly, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "A project, Thomas?" I asked, the words laced with an irony that cut deep. "Is that what you call selling my mother's pearls? Cashing out my retirement? Giving you $48,000 of my inheritance for the down payment on this house? Working 2 jobs, sacrificing my own life for yours, just so you could have every opportunity?" The words tumbled out, each one a sharp barb of truth. I looked at him, truly seeing the boy who was now a broken man. "You know what, Thomas? This feeling you have right now? This feeling of being thrown away, of being disposable? That's what it feels like when someone you've given everything to finally stands up for themselves after years of being taken for granted." My voice was quiet now, but firm, unwavering. "It's not about love, Thomas. It's about respect. And you lost mine a long time ago." I turned, and this time, I didn't look back. I walked towards Beatrice, who enveloped me in another comforting hug, and we left the courthouse, the cold, gray day, reflecting the emptiness that had settled in my heart. 4 months later, the sun streamed through the bay window of my living room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The room was sparse, yet filled with a quiet dignity. The family photos were back, my worn armchair sat by the fireplace, and the scent of lemon polish filled the air. This space, once a battleground, was now truly, unequivocally, mine. The first few weeks after the court order had been tense. Thomas and Valerie, initially, had avoided me. They would leave the house before I woke up and return after I had gone to bed. When we did cross paths, their faces were either a mask of tight-lipped disdain, Valerie, or averted guilt, Thomas. Following Evelyn's advice, I meticulously documented every single unapproved renovation they had undertaken, the gaudy backsplash Valerie had installed in the kitchen, the overly modern light fixtures, the strange, abstract art they had hung. I also documented the missing items, the discarded belongings of mine that were nowhere to be found. It was a sterile, painful process, but necessary. On day 28, just 2 days before their deadline, there was a tentative knock on my door. I opened it to find Thomas standing there, looking utterly exhausted, older than his years. His eyes were shadowed, his face drawn. There was no trace of the arrogance or the shame I had seen at the courthouse. He just looked broken. He held out a thick, legal-sized envelope. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse. I just I wanted to give you this. I took the envelope, my fingers brushing his. Inside, I found a stack of legal documents. My eyes scanned the top page. It was a quitclaim deed, signed and notarized, transferring his 30% ownership of the house to me, 100% mine. Valerie was right, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't deserve it. I can't keep taking from you. He paused, taking a shaky breath. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything. For letting Valerie manipulate me. For not standing up for you. For letting you think you were just disposable. A profound, hollow sadness settled over me. There was no anger, no satisfaction, no triumph. Just a deep ache for what we had lost, for the son I once knew, for the mother I had been. The pain of betrayal had faded into something more akin to grief. She wasn't pregnant, Mom, he continued, as if compelled to confess everything. The whole pregnancy thing, it was a lie. A way to make me commit to the house, to push you out. She wanted it to be ours. Completely. He finally met my gaze, his eyes glistening. I should have known. I should have seen it. I looked at him, searching for the boy I had raised. But all I saw was a stranger, stripped bare by his own choices. I hope you find what you're looking for, Thomas, I said, the words measured, reserved. It was all I could offer. He nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. Mom, could we ever, reconcile? I paused, thinking of all the years, all the love, all the sacrifices. I don't know, Thomas, I said honestly. I truly don't know. He turned and walked away, slowly, shoulders once again slumped. I haven't heard from him since. I stopped waiting for calls, for apologies, for anything that might never come. Instead, I focused on rebuilding, not just the house, but myself. The first thing I did was change every single lock. Then, Thomas's old room, once a shrine to his achievements, became my sanctuary, a library filled with books I had always wanted to read. Valerie's gaudy kitchen backsplash was meticulously chipped away, replaced by classic white subway tiles. My life now is filled with simple joys. My rose bushes thrive, their crimson petals a vibrant reminder of endurance. I've started a small vegetable garden, finding peace in the soil. A new book club meets in my living room once a month, filling the space with laughter and conversation. Beatrice, my steadfast anchor, comes over twice a week, no longer just a friend, but chosen family. My home is now truly mine, 100%, filled with peace, not just empty space. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. It's been a few months since Thomas walked away, and the quiet of my home is no longer an emptiness, but a comforting peace. My sister, Clara, passed away 6 weeks ago, peacefully, in her sleep. At the funeral, distant cousins, sensing the tension, asked about Thomas. I simply smiled, a genuine, unforced smile this time, and said, "We're not in touch." It was the truth, and it felt remarkably freeing. I've discovered new joys. I enrolled in a watercolor class at the community center. Seeing the world through an artist's eyes, mixing colors, creating beauty, it's a wonderful way to find fresh perspectives. Each brushstroke is a meditation, a tiny act of creation, but perhaps the most profound change has been my volunteering at a local women's shelter. Many of these women have stories of betrayal, of being cast aside by family. One woman, Maria, reminded me so much of myself. Her daughter had kicked her out, claiming she was a burden, keeping her from her grandchildren. The familiar ache surfaced, but this time, it was tempered by purpose. I saw her desperation, her fear. I saw myself. I connected Maria with Evelyn Reed, who, touched by the story and seeing the clear injustice, took Maria's case pro bono. Maria won. She didn't get her old life back, but she got justice and a chance to rebuild. The victory for Maria felt like a victory for me, too. It made me realize that my painful experience, my journey, could be a source of strength for others. I'm now considering becoming a volunteer advocate for seniors facing family exploitation. My voice, once silenced, can now be a beacon for those who feel invisible. My life is full. My days are woven with friends, hobbies, and a new, deeply satisfying purpose. I no longer wait for things that might never come. One sunny afternoon, as I was pruning my rose bushes, a sleek car pulled up. A young woman, impeccably dressed, stepped out, a professional smile on her face. "Eleanor Vance?" she asked. "I'm Chloe, a realtor. I just wanted to let you know that your property is highly sought after in this market. If you ever consider selling, I'd love to represent you. You could make a fortune." I looked at my thriving roses, at the neat rows of my new vegetable garden, at the familiar facade of my home. The house that had once felt like a prison, then a battleground, was now a sanctuary. It was a symbol of my strength, my resilience, my self-worth. "Thank you, Chloe," I said, my voice firm and clear. "But I'm not selling. This is my home." Her smile faltered slightly. But she nodded, handed me a card, and drove away. As the sun began to dip, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I settled into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea, ready to enjoy the evening peace. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was an unexpected sound, jarring the quiet. I opened the door, and my breath caught. It was Thomas. He looked different. Thinner, perhaps, and definitely tired. The sharp edges of his tailored suits were gone, replaced by worn jeans and a simple shirt. There were new lines around his eyes, deeper than before, and his posture was less confident, more hesitant. He looked older, not just in years, but in experience, in quiet suffering. "Mom," he began, his voice soft, almost fragile. His eyes, once so quick to avert, now met mine, and I saw something there I hadn't seen in a very long time: genuine remorse. Deep, unvarnished regret. "I've been in therapy," he confessed, his voice a low rumble. "A lot of therapy. And I've realized just how much I took from you. How much I let happen. How I let myself be blinded. It wasn't just the money, Mom. It was your love, your trust, your entire life." He paused, swallowing hard. "I don't expect you to forgive me. Not now. Maybe not ever. But I had to tell you. I know I messed up. Terribly. And I want to try to fix it. Whatever it takes. I know it will take time. A lot of time." I looked at him, truly seeing him, perhaps for the first time in years. The genuine remorse in his eyes was undeniable. The arrogance, the defensiveness, the excuses. They were gone, replaced by a quiet humility. My heart, which had been so guarded, softened just a fraction. It wasn't an instant forgiveness, not by a long shot, but it was a crack in the wall. "Come in, Thomas," I said, stepping aside. "I'm making tea. We can talk. Tomorrow morning, perhaps. For coffee." I made no promises, offered no guarantees. The wound was deep, and healing would be a slow, arduous process. His face, which had been etched with defeat, brightened with a tentative hope. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you." He stepped inside, a ghost in the hallway that was once his. I closed the door, leaning against it for a moment, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. Uncertainty, yes, but also peace. A deep, abiding peace. Regardless of what the future held for Thomas and me, I knew I would be okay. My house, my friends, my purpose, they were my foundation, the pillars of my new life. I was whole. I walked back to my armchair, ready to enjoy the beautiful sunset, knowing that my life, in many ways, was just beginning.